Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to this webinar. My name is Dennis Dowling. I direct the iForm Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. We are very pleased to be organising this webinar this afternoon, which is part of what's known as the EU Industry Week 2021. Presentations and meetings hosted as part of this Industry Week provide a platform for those from across the EU to discuss industry challenges as well as approaches which in the longer term will help European industry to deliver jobs, growth and innovation. The title of the roundtable discussion this afternoon is Upskilling for the Digital Future of Industry, and I look forward to the fruitful exchange of ideas between our speakers. I'm pleased to welcome an impressive panel of guest speakers today, and I would like to acknowledge and thank them for giving up their time to inform us and guide the discussion on this important topic, not only for our research centre, but also for our industry partners and the ecosystem at large. The roundtable will be moderated by Claire McGee. Claire is the Head of Education and Innovation in IBEC, Ireland's largest business representative group. Her work includes enhancing Ireland's talent pipeline to boost our country's capacity for innovation. Let me start with the structure of this webinar. We will first listen to two short introductory talks. We will then have an open discussion on the rest of the panelists to explore ideas under three themes. Firstly, unlocking digital transformation. Secondly, the impact for the workforce and employers. And finally, upskilling and reskilling enablers. Incidentally, we'll be circulating a poll during this afternoon's discussion to obtain feedback from those attending. You are also invited to post your queries on the question and answer panel. Before we start, I need to mention that this session will be recorded for the iForm YouTube channel. Let me now welcome our first speaker, Anthony McCauley, who is the chair of the ICT SkillNet Industry Expert Group. You're very welcome, Anthony.
Anthony is the chair of the ICT SkillNet Industry Expert Group. You're very welcome, Anthony.
Hello, Dennis. I'm hoping you can see my presentation.
Yes, yep.
And here we go. Okay, welcome everybody. As Dennis said, my name is Anthony McCauley, and my background is in research and development. I worked with Fujitsu, heading their research and development here in Ireland, and I'm now a strategic advisor with SkillNet Ireland, and I'm, as Dennis said, chair of their expert group, ICT SkillNet Expert Group. So what I just want to cover very briefly, it's just a short discussion to provoke the conversation later, is an outline of what we've identified as the challenges that are facing industry with respect to digital, how we think those challenges can be addressed, and what we're picking up from various studies and reports. And based on that, we've come up with a SkillNet Ireland skills development framework, which we think is based on best practice and based on understanding what's going on globally. And then very briefly, just a little example of such an example of a SkillNet program that we're running around artificial intelligence. So with respect to the challenges, what are they? Well, I think they're well documented. Industry is saying, in terms of digital adoption, where do we start? What's the business benefit? Why do we do this? How do we go about it? What are the types of skills that we need? If we do go digital, what are the dangers in terms of sharing our information with a wider audience, the patent protection, IP, and so on. So cybersecurity issues are there. Challenges in terms of working in a collaborative format. What's the value add for our company? If we go down this path, how do we make sure that we get the benefits that we're told that we will get out of it? And what you're seeing is those same challenges identified as part of a study that was done for Ireland with respect to digitization in the manufacturing sector. And they're the same challenges that we are seeing as a result of a 600 plus qualitative survey that we undertook with companies during the lockdown and COVID. And what we're understanding is, what are the types of principles? If we are to attract companies to go down the digital roadmap and to have the digital ambition, what are the things that we need to put in place? And one of the things is a credible ecosystem of credible practitioners, those people who can give confidence to their industry counterparts that when they go down this path, it will work for them. The business benefits will be realized, but that they need to do it in a structured manner. And it's going to be different depending on the sectors. Some sectors are more mature than others and therefore require a different approach. And what industry is hoping for, particularly with small and medium size, is an integrated program, stepping stones. Take us along the path, hold our hand throughout the journey, and give us the guidance and support that we need. And therefore, understanding those challenges on an industry by industry basis, sector by sector, is key. And then it's demonstrating to them that this can be achieved through use cases, through demonstrators, saying, here are businesses who have gone down this path. They have realized the benefit, they are seeing competitive advantage, they're growing their business globally, and therefore it's good for you to also go down this path. And then one of the key aspects is, how do we pay for this? How do we reduce the total cost of ownership? There's a raft of different financial instruments that small industry, medium-sized industries, and enterprise level can acquire and use. And it's how do you do that in the most effective way to offset the type of investment that's needed. Governments are providing them, there is bureaucracy. How do you get around that bureaucracy and target industries in the most effective way? So what we've done is, in terms of looking at these and looking at what's happening best practice with respect to Europe, if you look at Asia, there are structures out there where companies have said, or where governments have said, and where standards bodies have said, look, there's an approach to this. And we've taken these pillars from this. So this is a framework that we've come up with. And there's 5 key pillars: business strategy, making sure that when you're putting in digital, it realizes the business benefits that it's designed for. The business priorities are met, the long-term strategy is fulfilled, and therefore you're seeing deployment in the whole. The people, the human capital, the creativity, the culture is in place. And it's fostered. The talent, the expertise, how do we grow it? Do we bring in external expertise? Do we grow it ourselves? What type of timeline is in place? And then flexing that marketplace, making sure that they are engaged with the ecosystem that they operate in, the suppliers within the supply chain, but also beyond that, within academia, within industry, wider industry, within clusters, whatever it is. How do we harness that to look at others who are going on the same roadmap as ourselves? So we gain the confidence and ambition, but also, are there other better ways to accelerate the adoption that we are trying to undertake rather than us starting from scratch? And then finally, it is those operational systems. It's putting in place that digital thread, and it's making sure that what you do on the operational system piece aligns with what you as an organization culturally and strategically want to do. And we feel that in order to do that, as I've said earlier, you need to be bringing in subject matter experts to inform and give confidence to industry that they need to be, the community needs to be there to give them the confidence to go ahead, to broker the types of relationships, to foster that type of community so that they're getting those insights and lessons learned from others, and they're also getting opportunities to work with industries to accelerate them into areas that maybe they would not go. So partnerships and collaboration, and then in access to simulators, demonstrators within the academic environment, within the business environment, that says, here's how you first of all can test these technologies in a safe environment, somewhat like the European digital hubs, and then here are the business use cases. Here's the business benefit that you can realize if you go down this path based on best practice from other industries or other businesses within that industry. And just finally, to close, in terms of this, SkillNet Ireland, it's in the name, skills. We think it's absolutely critically important to the adoption of digital. And that's what we're seeing with AI. What we're trying to do here is build foundation skills, incorporate that into a business environment as lifelong learning. It's going to be a continuous process. It's about collaboration through this triple helix between industry, academia, and government, building foundation skills right through then to PhD level and expertise, enterprise-led, making sure that we are delivering the types of skills that industry is crying out for, and then ensuring that we are harnessing the best of what Ireland offers in terms of the clusters and the collaborations and the communities. And that's how we believe this is going to be achieved. Skills is key. It's a key differentiator which Ireland has, and we need to make the most of it if we're going to be competitive on an international basis. Paula, over to you.
Thanks very much, Anthony, for that overview, and certainly that structural digital approach that SkillNet are using is very interesting. As Anthony is just outlined over to Paolo. Paolo is the director of EIT manufacturing, or the education director of it. And prior to taking up her role, she also worked in the Polytechnic di Milano. So Paolo, you're very welcome.
Yes, thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Dennis, for the introduction. Can you hear me?
The sound needs it's a little bit weak, Paolo. Perhaps a little bit louder would be great.
Okay, I will keep the mic closer. And can you see the slides?
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for the invitation. Actually, for our European Association dealing with and addressing manufacturing innovation ecosystem, upskilling industry is a very relevant topic. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to CEDEFOP. We have here an overview on how, what is the position of the status of manufacturing with regard to digitalization. And digitalization is usually associated with good practices and results. But here we see on the left side of the slide that manufacturing is not doing so well. We are below the average in Europe concerning the use of PCs. We are more or less in line with the use of digital analytics, and we are a little bit better, or I would say better, in terms of use of robots. In particular, Ireland is doing very well. You see 24% of manufacturing of companies in Ireland are using robots compared to an average in Europe of 8% and 21% the average for manufacturing. If overall manufacturing is not doing very well on digitalization, as we can also see from the right graphs on the slide, except for again other technologies than PC or pure digital technologies like robots, and this is not a surprise. So starting from this picture on the landscape of digitalization in Europe and in manufacturing, I would like to, as we are an European association, to quote our president to highlight that the best investment is on human, on our people. And in fact, Europe is on the verge of different type of transformation. The most important is digitalization, but there are also green economy. We're shifting towards a circular economy, towards a less impact, to reduce the impact on environment. So it's very important that we, in order to be competitive, Europe invest on the people and on the education and the skill growth. In particular, it's important to exploit all the variety, all the wealth of humans and addressing diversities and gender balance in order to prepare Europe for being competitive and accompany and prepare this skill shift. So how do we address this in IT manufacturing? We have created an overall architecture, a platform that is learner-centric, meaning that learners are mobilized in order to make some hands-on activities dealing with real equipment, like learning factories. They are exposed through digital connection, through real context with the workers and the engineers on the shop floor and with industrial challenges. And they're creating their personalized learning path that based on different combination of modules allow them to increase their competencies and skills enhanced by simulation and augmented virtual reality. So this is our asset, educational asset. On this we use as a basis to have a skill-driven learning, meaning that the learners on the end of their path gets micro-credentials. And in the future, we are pushing on this in order to create a stackable credentials that can be connected to competence frameworks related to the needs of the industry. And so this overall, in addition to that, we offer intense personalized learning programs for, let's say, revamp talents that maybe have already a lot of competence and skills, but need to update those skills in order to be aligned with the digital world, that the new digital challenges, and also acquire more, being exposed to different culture and disciplines, to develop a more entrepreneurial and innovation-oriented kind of skills. We offer these programs to employees and professionals, and the duration is from 1 year to 1 year and a half. And finally, the learners get some certificates labeled by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. But what we think is very important is kind of a program that we offer with an integrated approach to SMEs. So this, the idea is to accompany groups of SMEs in the transformation that can be very easily digitalization, but also shifting towards reduction of carbon fossil fuel and becoming greener and so on. The process starts from a skills assessment to the definition of a roadmap, and then a package of training to be deployed at all levels of the organization. In the end, the companies acquire certification for having prepared their workforce, their top managers, their HR department for the transformation. This was a short overview of our approach to upskilling. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Paolo. I think one of the strengths of EIT is just gaining the best from across Europe and best practice, which is a real strength in terms of that program. I'd like to now hand over to Claire, who's going to chair the seminar going forward.
Thank you, Dennis. My name is Claire McGee. I'm Head of Education and Innovation Policy at IBEC, and I'm absolutely delighted to chair this roundtable discussion this afternoon. I think never has there been a more timely or appropriate discussion around digital transformation. So long before the challenges of COVID-19 or indeed Brexit, I think many Irish manufacturing enterprises were on the cusp, I suppose, of transformation. But I'm here today to listen and learn from a really esteemed panel of experts around how we can kind of hear from what's happening across Europe and internationally, and learn some best practice, bring that back to Ireland here, and so that we're really ready to kind of unlock the potential for digital transformation. As Paolo mentioned there, it's really about people, their skills, their talent. So how do we ready ourselves ultimately to lock that digital transformation? So joining Paula and Anthony on the panel today, we've a great lineup for you. So let me introduce them to you. First, we've Dr. Ulla Engelmann. She's the head of the unit in the social economy in DG GROW, and that's the directorate in the European Commission responsible for internal market, industry, entrepreneurship and SMEs. So highly, highly relevant today. We also have Konstantinos Palakis, expert in education and training in SEDIOF. That's the Centre for the Development of Vocational Training. Rina Kennedy, who's the research manager for Stryker. Michael Lohan, Head of Life Science and Talent Transformation and Innovation at IDA Ireland, Kieran Delaney, who is from Munster Technological University and the coordinator of Fit for Factories of the Future. And finally, last but not least, is Andrew Lynch, and he's the Chief Innovation Officer with IMO, or Irish Manufacturing Research. And just before we get into the discussion, as Dennis said, we've got three kind of overarching themes that we want to discuss with you today. But John Oliver, who's iForum's Research Centre Manager, is kind of going to manage the questions and answers for us. So please do drop us some questions into the Q&A box, which you should see at the bottom of your screen there. And as we transition into each different theme, we'll check in for questions from John. And I think there's also going to be a couple of polls as that goes on. But without further ado, I invite all the panelists really to kind of switch on their cameras. We'll have a good conversation. But maybe, Trina, I might start with you. I think we're all really keen here to see how digital transformation really plays out in practice. And you work in one of the largest medical device manufacturing kind of companies at a very global level. Can you talk to us a little bit about the pace of digital transformation varied across the different kind of global Stryker sites, and maybe what are some of the challenges you're experiencing there?
Absolutely, thanks Claire, and yes indeed, Stryker is a global leader in medical technology, and Stryker's a growth company, and you know, despite COVID, to give you a scale of that, in the last 2 years we've had over 14 billion in sales. And until COVID hit, we had 40 years straight growth. So we're very much a growth company. And 80 years ago, when we started, that growth was driven by innovation, and it still is. But it's innovation that meets customer needs, and that sets our business strategy, and that is enabled then through digital transformation. So there's very much that driver across Stryker, and the pace has taken off. So to give a little bit more about, so Stryker's focused across medtech in orthopedics, medical, surgical, neurotechnology and spine, so very broad range. And I'm speaking to you today from Stryker's dedicated additive manufacturing centre for R&D and manufacturing in Cork, and we supply additive from our Ireland base here across the globe for Stryker. But it was customer needs 20 years ago that drove our innovation and R&D into additive. So I guess 20 years since we started. So this medtech is a highly regulated industry. And that's a good thing. You know, we want to know that our medical devices are safe and that, you know, they're produced consistently. And our customers certainly want to know that. And if I need a med device in the morning, I want to know that it's safe. So how then do you navigate safe and tested processes if they're best driven by software that requires constant updating? Okay, so our workflow processes lead us to check the consequences of every single change we make before they're implemented. So this is new. How do we navigate this? How do we navigate the regs? And that's exactly what you do. You navigate your way through them. A second focus, and to talk to another challenge, a second big focus towards unlocking the power of digital for us was very much around our skills and our talents, so very topical for today. And if we consider Industry 3.0 versus 4.0, with the former, ICT was a very small component within, right? And our talent, like a lot of industries, was strong in mechanical disciplines, some electronics, and minimal overlay then with systems thinking. And so to reiterate it, ICT was a small component, whereas now it's systems thinking is core. It overlays the whole thing. ICT is a much larger component, but mechanical and electronic is still very necessary. So it's not a total switchover. It's still there and still very necessary, but it's all overarched by systems thinking. It's that, you know, all encompassed. And we needed to recognize that and recognize the need for less traditional talent and build the capabilities accordingly. And for leadership to get there, you know, that really, and to get beyond that traditional, IT will sort that out for you. You know, that's that's not, that didn't work and that doesn't work. And then as well, sort of a vague, software engineers, it's too broad. We had to get from this vague idea of we need more software people to a full understanding of whom and what we really needed. And we took the time, it took time to get that shift in thinking and understanding. And when I look at traditionally, with engineers, with technicians, quality, now there's about 12 different disciplines within just software, and that took a huge shift in the business. And it continues to develop within the business. And that's from 20 years, a 20-year start.
So what I'm hearing here is that this is not a fly-by-night. This is very much a long-term strategic play for organizations, and that it's not just an add-on addition so it really needs this kind of senior, it's a bottom-up, top-down kind of all-encompassing approach. Kieran, kind of building on that, because you're with the factory and fit for the factory of the future, which is a mouthful in its own right, and just thinking about that initiative, you're obviously working with other manufacturing stakeholders across Europe. You're trying to identify these needs that Trina's outlined there, but also trying to troubleshoot some of those. Can you talk to us a little bit, like, is that kind of the same across Europe? And what are the other needs that you're probably hearing from some of your other stakeholders within that initiative and project?
Well, I think Trina said something really important when she talked about systems thinking, that kind of overarching requirement, and what comes with it in the context of the digital skills part, but also what we all call the 21st century skills component, these skills around problem solving, planning, that are ultimately about leadership and about solving and achieving things. This package is really at the heart of what we're talking about. And what we found in our work is that there is no one size fits all. That there are certain characteristics associated with, for example, how multinationals would deal with this, and different characteristics and challenges associated with how SMEs must approach this and how they work with other organizations to do it. But again, Trina is right in the sense that there must be a commitment. And the key contributor to that are is leadership and management within the company, but there's also a lot more going on in the sense that when we're trying to develop new solutions, the constant phrase that keeps coming back to us is really about managing change, and taking a holistic picture, and the whole idea of the Fit for the Factories of Future initiative is actually to try and crystallize that and to develop and increase the capacity. So the way the project has been constructed as what's called a coordinated action is really about capacity building across Europe to bring together expertise and to focus on developing new solutions, build networks, make connections, and enable these things to happen more effectively in the future. And one of the key things we were focused on is the fact that starting out the project a few years ago, we had a situation in Europe where up to 40% of the people lacked digital skills. In reality, we had even before the COVID crisis, we had a challenge with digital skills. We had something approaching an emergency. And the whole idea of the transition to Industry 4.0 actually is really about, potentially making things a lot worse, where you have more digital technologies, more internet-driven, smart sensing solutions coming into the mix. The gap is likely to get wider. And there's lots of things that need to be done to address this. And one of the things that our project is focused on is amplifying the voice of the learner, the worker in this picture. So it is essential that the leadership within the company drive this process, but it's also essential that the worker and the workforce, that their voice and their contribution to this is amplified, and that there's an engagement process that puts and connects the right picture, and then can move forward as a more common grouping. And these things can't be just soft and fuzzy. They actually have to make a difference, and ultimately you have to see a pathway which says these new upskilling initiatives impacted on the bottom line. The workers' contribution actually improved innovation, improved outputs. So really that's the shape of the project, and it, as Trina suggested, it requires a commitment. It's this stuff is not easy. You really have to go all in.
Very much empowering the employee to be part of that journey as well.
Absolutely. You can't put together an effective picture without the voice of the worker.
Very true, and I think we'll come back to that maybe in our next theme, Kieran, if that's okay, because I want to just bring in Ulla there from the European Commission, because I think you're in a really interesting position to you're charged with steering member states, I suppose, at a government level to embrace digitalization. And I suppose sitting here in Ireland, I'm very keen to hear, I suppose, how you're actually doing that, and while you're addressing some of the challenges that have been set out there by Kieran and Trina.
Yes, thank you very much. And it has been recognized that digitization of industry is, of course, one of the key challenges for the union, and that's why when we look at the twin transition, so the digitalization, but also the green transition, these are key parts for also our recovery, because if we put it now in the COVID context, we are now looking how can we help the recovery of our economies. And there, the digitalization and the green transition are key also to foster our resilience. And this has also been recognized because when you look at the Resilience and Recovery Fund, which has been made available to the member states, because this is one way you were asking how to steer member states. So via this Resilience and Recovery Fund, where we ask the member states to come up with national reform and investment plans for recovery. So in this discussion, we are putting targets, and one of the targets in this reform plans is 20% has to go to digitization. Just to give you also another target, 37% for green and helping climate change. But you see the 20% is something which has to be reflected in the plans the member states are submitting to the Commission. And then there is a discussion going on how these plans are evolved, and by end of April, these plans need to be finalized. But also, we are now starting a new financial programming period. Also in this programming period, digitalization has been recognized as a very important area, and that's why the Digital Europe program has been put in place and focusing on AI, cybersecurity. There had been a cybersecurity communication, a key legislative proposal last year, where we want to help the member states to guide them on the developments in the digitalization. And there had also been other major legislative proposals like the Data Governance Act, the Digital Services Act, and the Digital Market Act. So you see a lot of legislative proposals which came out last year were in the area of digitalization. And also one tool which has been put in place to help are the digital innovation hubs, which in the different regions should help. So because some of the speakers have mentioned the SMEs, because the SMEs need a place to go to get advice on digitalization, because they will not have all the competences in their company. And the role of this digital innovation hub, but also regional clusters, for example, is to help this SMEs to digitalize, and that's why we look at all kinds of business organizations. How can they help with in the digitalization, and particularly skills area?
I'll move on, Ola, because I just think we might have just missed the last piece of your contribution there, but we'll try and come back to it. But it's great to know that this resilience and recovery package that's under development really has such a high focus on digitalization, and we all know that innovation ultimately builds resilience across our enterprises, across our people as well. So I think this is one to watch for us. Konstantinos, if I may come to you, because I think you're in a really great place to talk to us about skills gaps, because you're ultimately analysing those skills gaps for the futures. And Paula presented some of your research in her slides. And I'm just, I suppose it's a little bit puzzling, you know, that we have high rates of adoption of robotics, but yet lower rates of adoption elsewhere. But does that kind of reflect a huge variation across different member states, or is it quite consistent across Europe? You might give us some background thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you, and good evening to all participants. Basically, issue with digitalization, when you look at the data at the European level, as was presented to you by my colleague at the European Commission previously, there's so much emphasis on trying to push the digitalization, but many member states are starting from very different starting points. So it is common knowledge, I think, that several member states, for instance, in Scandinavian countries, Denmark, and Sweden, they perform pretty well in many scores, different assessments that are being made in relation to the digital competences of citizens, but also in the recent European company survey that SEDEFOP and Eurofound carried out, on which the data that was presented to you by Paula before was based on. On the other hand, you have countries such as Romania, who tend to be underperformers. Ireland is usually somewhere, you know, above the average, but also not at the top. It performs pretty well on some occasions and less well on others. I think, you know, in relation to the manufacturing establishments, what we could clearly see in our data is that obviously, as you would expect, you know, because of additive manufacturing, because of the push towards Industry 4.0 type of technologies, there is obviously a greater use of hard digital technologies, including robotics. But we were also surprised when we saw that when you're looking at an indicator whereby you're trying to see to what extent workers are using computers, various computerized type of equipment in their everyday tasks, the average is lower compared to other industries. So, you know, financial industry, various service industries obviously have a higher percentage of people who are avid digital users. Now, why is this important in my opinion? It's important because something that we also know in relation to digitalization is that one of the key things that you can do in order to spread digitalization is start using digital equipment. The more you use, the better you are, the lower the skill gaps that you encounter. So obviously, you know, the more companies would be investing into proliferating the use of digital infrastructure and digital equipment across different companies, the better position you will be to be able to catch up in the future, to, you know, so that you don't miss the digital train. I will conclude by making one final point, if I have time, which is we usually talk about skill gaps. And one puzzling thing for me in relation to digitalization has always been that, you know, a statistic tends to be cited that 40% of European adults lack digital skills. But then when you're looking at digital skill gaps, whereby you're trying to see and compare the digital literacy of individuals compared to what their job requires, that percentage is closer to 10%. Now, what does that mean? That means that, okay, there may be European workers who lack digital skills, but there's also a huge percentage of jobs in the European continent, which you can call them low digitally intensive jobs. So obviously the key policy recommendation there is that what we should be trying to do is we should be trying to raise the bar. We should be trying to raise the level of digital preparedness and intensity for a large share of companies in Europe. That may translate to higher digital skill gaps in the future, but that doesn't, we shouldn't mind the higher digital skill gaps are. It can actually be a good thing. It can actually be a signal that we are concertedly trying to make our European establishments more competitive and more digitally adept.
Thank you. And I suppose just before we wrap up this session, I'm really keen around that kind of concept of digitally adept, more competitive, more innovative. And Andrew, you work with a lot of Irish SMEs. And we know that there are some kind of capability challenges within SMEs around this agenda. So I just wanted to know, does your experience of working with Irish SMEs kind of validate what you're hearing across Europe? Are we outliers, or are we challenged with some of the same issues that other kind of European enterprises are facing?
Thanks, Claire. What you're really asking is Ireland different, I guess, and it certainly is. It's wetter, greener, the Guinness is better here. Ireland is a very, very different ecosystem in many ways compared with, what we see in Europe. So if we look at, the profile of industries that's in Ireland, we have a very strong representation from large multinationals in our community. And we just heard there from Trina, the fantastic work that they're doing. And I must tip a hat to my colleague, Michael Lohan, and all the work that he and his colleagues do in the IDA. It's fantastic for the economy in Ireland, and obviously supported by SFI and Enterprise Ireland, all the other entities that are making this a vibrant economy in which these large multinational clusters can exist in. And there are other differences in Ireland as well. I mean, if you consider a supply chain on a small island that's peripheral to the mainland Europe compared with being in the heartland of Germany or Czech Republic and Poland, the supply chain differential there philosophically and so on is very, very different to what we have on this island. So it is different in many ways and for many different reasons, and actually is a hugely positive system overall, because if you think about it, Ireland is small enough that we're all connected to one another. We all know each other. We can connect in and out of these organizations, but large enough to be a very significant test bed for the planet in terms of Industry 4.0, digitalization, and so on. And when we talk about the green agenda, we have a fantastic advantage here in Ireland because green is our national color. The whole world turns green the 17th of every March, and we've the only, for example, we've the only milk anywhere in Europe that doesn't have a traceable dioxin level in it. So there's a huge amount of positives for Ireland in all of this. But to connect back in terms of what you've said, I'm deeply disappointed with the process thus far because I can find very little to disagree with anyone, and I'd love an argument with someone in all of this, but I do have to say, but it is coming. If I was looking at the fantastic presentation that Paolo gave, and I really enjoyed it from many levels. And if I look at, say, for example, the statistics that we heard, or that Konstantinos has put together, it is correct that Ireland's number of companies versus number of robots is on a par, in the middle, as he said. And I think that's commendable. But if we dig a little bit deeper and we look at the number of robots or cobots or whatever you want to call it per 10,000 workers, and we look at, say, stuff that's published in Forbes, for example, last year, you could see that actually the number of robot institutions anywhere in Europe, for example, like Germany, for example, is third in the world behind Korea and Japan, possibly Singapore, maybe fourth in the world. They're up at 800-900 robots per 10,000 workers. Germany is probably around 350, 400, can't remember the exact number, but Ireland in that metric is second last only to Greece. So I would reiterate the need that we have here in terms of the uptake of it. Now, there are a whole pile of reasons why that would be the case. For example, if you look at the profile of industry that we have on this island, it doesn't necessarily lend itself naturally to high automation activities. And I thought it was a brilliant comment there from Konstantinos about as we heard earlier on from Anthony, this digital ambition. I love it. And it's reiterated again in the types of jobs and so on. That's the excitement for me. This is where we need to be. I don't like small skills gaps at all. It means we're, good enough isn't good enough. We need to be moving that agenda on as positively as we can. We need to start burning the platform ourselves, because this is coming down the line in a very significant way. And just one final point, if we do look at digitalization, it's different from automation. These are completely different concepts. And if we consider something like data analytics, for example, where we see a high level or a low level of engagement from Ireland, 33% versus 40 in the European Union and so on. There's two very different types of people in industry in Ireland. You've got an SME owner manager and you've got a large multinational executive. And in every other industry 4.0 technology for robots, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, AR, VR and so on, they think exactly the same. They're a bit worried about it. They want to understand how it goes. There are a lot of what Anthony talked about makes an awful lot of sense. The one place that they diverge is in data analytics. Large multinationals invest significant time, effort, and expertise in understanding what that term means and physically and really doing it on the floors of their organization. I mean, really committing to it. Whereas SMEs, there's a nomenclature issue. They think they're doing it. They don't really generally understand the concept because it's one or two levels up from a glorified accountancy system in many terms, linking certain activities to a turnover number and so on. So there's a deficit of understanding even at that fundamental level. And the challenge that we're talking about for digitization and digital skills isn't any sort of esoteric, glorified, we bring in cool technology and sensors. It's, are you willing to teach your staff what the concept of standard deviation actually means? And how many companies are willing to take that kind of a step so that we can get the fundamentals of these tools into, as my colleague in Cork, Kieran said, into the workers' heads and toolbox so they can engage with this world. And that is
so much to do, Andrew, much to do.
Absolutely.
Much to do. John, I'm conscious of our time, but I wonder if there is any questions, or should we rapidly move into it?
Yeah, there are a few questions, but what I think some of them might be appropriate for the next section. So I'll just take one for this section. It's mostly directed towards Konstantinos, and it's about what types of supports do the best-in-class countries provide in order to help them achieve leadership in digital skills?
Thank you for the question. The type of support obviously begins from the education and training system. I think most of these countries essentially digitalize the education that they are providing to their students and to their learners by adequately investing also in digital skills of their teachers and the trainers and so on and so forth, and providing adequate digital infrastructure so they get the basics right. But then in terms of companies as well, I think something that is effectively done is this notion of trying to develop digital skill ecosystems whereby companies are working very much close together with education and training institutions in trying to deliver usually at regional, local level, the right type of skills that are needed to cater and foster the specific competitive advantage that these companies may have. More recently, to build on what Andrew was saying previously, I can see that there is a much faster push in some EU countries to actually invest in the development of AI-related skills. But by AI-related skills, it actually comes down very much to the concept of standard deviation, or you can basically rephrase it into the basic understanding of how you should be accurately measuring, keeping track of data within your company, trying to make sense with accurate data science methodologies of trying to separate the noise from the signal in relation to how your company is performing. By doing so, and by enabling a greater share of the workforce to understand the basics of, we call it machine learning, but in essence, it comes down to what I described previously, the ability to understand basic data and the ability to try to predict some basic aggregates of your company. By doing so, I can see that, these countries are also preparing themselves to be able to steer very well into the next wave of the digital transformation, which is the fourth industrial revolution, as some people call it.
Great, thanks, Konstantinos. So we'll just do a quick. Sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
Just quickly, just come in on two things. One thing with respect to best practice. Increasingly, I think what's going to be very, very important is culture. Culture in organizations, particularly in my experience of 10 years working in the research and development, those companies that did very, very well with digital had the right culture. They had the right mindset. They had the right ambition. And when you look at digital and you look at analytics, Andrew was talking about large organizations investing in analytics. Some do and do it very well, others don't. And what you see is, I dealt with large and small organizations. There's small organizations who grow up in a digital mindset, and data is at the heart of what they do, and they do it very, very well, and they know how to build their business model around that. I've met large organizations that haven't got a clue about data analytics and are missing out on it because of that. So it's very much leadership, it's very much about culture, and it's about the mindset in order to embrace those things. And that's where investment needs to be put. A long time ago, you know, I was of the opinion strategy was absolutely centrally important. Alignment to strategy. I'm increasingly of the opinion it's alignment to human capital. That's where the investment has got to be put.
And I think actually that leads us on really nicely maybe to our next theme, which is around that impact for kind of people and human capital, the workforce and employers. And Michael, maybe I might come to you, because I think you, from your desk within the IDA, you have a great bird's eye view of manufacturing across Ireland. I mean, it spans nearly, it's so important to our Irish economy, to our society. It spans so many different sectors: food, pharma, medtech, ICT, just to name a few. It's in every region, every county. So can you talk to us a little bit about how, I suppose, the pace across, you know, the speed of transformation across those different industries, and also just building on that concept about leadership and the impact then at an operational level in terms of workforce design and workforce planning. How are you seeing that evolve as companies are kind of embarking on this digital transformation journey?
Thanks, Claire, and good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, so I think a lot of what has been said, I'd fully agree with as well, just to start there in terms of the contributions thus far. From an IDA perspective, you know, and Andrew picked up on this, as did Anthony, you know, we're very fortunate that we have such a strong FDI base and we have such a strong manufacturing base. And we also have to remind ourselves of the agility that sector has shown, you know, over 70 years in Ireland, reflects through multiple revolutions. I know we're at Industry 4, but remember, we did start at Industry 1, if we're honest, and we have evolved forward. And we've done that very successfully in highly regulated sectors, as Trina mentioned, in terms of medical device and life sciences and high value manufacturing. And I suppose to answer the question in terms of what do we see at the moment, we see exactly what other contributors have mentioned. We see some that are at the very front end of this in terms of their culture, their commitment. You know, Trina is an example of that in terms of what's happening in Striker. Remember, in Ireland, we have 2 World Economic Forum recognized digital lighthouses here in Ireland. For a small country, that's a significant achievement. And that talks to the sort of culture and ambition that here in Ireland, and I believe that's going to be the start of more to come. But also we have companies who are very much, and I like the comment of the noise from the signal. I think we also have a band of companies who actually don't even hear the noise, let alone can find the signal. So there's a large amount of work to be done in that space as well. So from our perspective, from an IDA perspective, what we have seen in our own new strategy, which we just launched last month, was we've, as well as, you know, the usual things that IDA are known for in terms of, you know, driving for innovation and job creation and the regional spread, which you talked about, Claire, we are doubling down in 2 key other areas. One of those is, you know, the green economy and sustainability and what that means. And the second then is what we're calling transformation. And transformation to us is about skills and innovation, because they go hand in hand in that context. And from our viewpoint, we have been working with our client base, you know, in the last probably 5-6 years in particular, we've seen a significant change in terms of the culture and the focus of a lot of our client companies. They are starting to build their strategies and understand what those strategies look like, understanding those gaps. And some of them have, you know, to someone's point earlier, some of them have large gaps to fill, and others maybe have less so. But we are starting to see a remove towards upskilling and retraining people within their own organizations, because that's where they see the key resource coming from in the short term, complementing that then with work such that Anthony is doing and that the higher education system is bringing in. So we're seeing a collective effort in that. I think also what I'd like to say as well, Claire, is that, you know, it's not just about companies. I think the state has a role to play here as well. And, you know, Anthony set out very well about, you know, the process of you have to have strategy and leadership, and then you have to have the infrastructure and the means to actually bring that talent forward. And the state has a role to play there. And thankfully now we have, you know, a very clear direction from a state perspective and commitment as well. You know, in the Industry 4 strategy that was launched over a year ago as well. Like, that's a very clear indication from a state perspective what that means. The investments that's happened in IMR and the expansion of IMR and Andrew and his team is critically important. The work that Dennis and his team do in IFORM and confirmed through our colleagues in SFI, and indeed the new centre that we're bringing online for the discrete manufacturing centres as well, and sector, you know, in Limerick this year. They're all clear commitments to Irish State, where they put digitalisation for manufacturing, the skills and the immersion that needs to happen. That's critical from an Ireland perspective, and critical to support our companies to transition, because it's a journey. It's going to be, some people are going to be able to, it's like the marathon, you know. Andrew is very quick, he can do it there in 2 hours. I'm probably a 4-hour man at that context. It'll be no different, I think, in the journey of digitalisation as well.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There's so much now available to us, you know, both internally within our organisations and then externally provided kind of to leverage by the state. But what I'm hearing a little bit, and Kieran, I might come back to you around, you know, your project really, because, you know, I'm thinking about some companies, and it's a little bit like the advert for, you know, banking. I don't really know what a tracker mortgage is, and I'm kind of afraid to put up my hand here and say, I'm not too sure where I am on that digital transformation journey. Where do I start? Because there's such a choice out there. So from your experiences, where should we start prioritizing, and what should be our focus now over the short, medium and long term be?
Well, I suppose one of the things here to understand is how we as people learn. We basically build our understanding of the world and learn through what's called generative practices. So it's important to kind of understand that point and build a picture that's accurate of where we are at the moment. You're in a sense, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to build the most accurate picture through an engagement with key stakeholders. So in the case of the company, it would be the leadership, it would be the workforce, it would be people who can enable that and support that. Shouldn't be afraid to get help. And to build that picture of the strengths and weaknesses that currently exist, because that's where you're starting from. In parallel with that, you have this agenda to determine where you're going, and this is something that again is where, let's say, what Anthony talked about earlier, is this is where kind of subject matter experts and supporters and enablers come in. You know, advisors and insights from your ecosystem can support that process. So part of this is about capacity building, where individual companies can look around and see exactly who's available to it. Part of it is about basically critical analysis within your organization, saying, what are the strengths and weaknesses, with a view to building on the strengths and moving forward. And then you're talking about building a series of mechanisms which are scaffolded to get from where you are to where you want to be. Now, these are not easy processes, but you can start by developing a core support group, you know, getting support from people like Anthony and Andrew, and I suppose a key part at the center of all of this is to admit the vulnerability that goes with going through this learning process. A lot of people who are practiced in developing new innovative solutions understand this idea of looking at vulnerabilities as a way of uncovering future possibilities and new innovations, and that's really what's going on here. But in the past, a lot of the emphasis might have been on the process or the technology. And at the end of the day, the technology is really an enabler for something. And the mismatch that has, let's say, often existed between the innovation process and doing something and that's implementing the change and what's going on with your human capacity is really something that we all need to address. And I suppose in very specific terms, I've talked to a number of companies who have gone through a change process. And looking back at it, said we started the upskilling conversation too late. We started thinking about that way too late. And in reality, the day you start thinking about making a change is the day you start thinking about the human capacity and the change process around the people involved.
That has to be integral then to the culture. That kind of lifelong learning, that capacity building culture has to be key.
Yes, and
develop that growth mindset in individuals as well.
Growth mindset's a really important phrase here. I mean, and also I think this idea of digital ambition and being proactive, it's not nice to have. This is actually an essential mindset to step and move forward here. Otherwise, I think you're in a space where you have delusions of adequacy, and I think we should move forward looking at digital ambition and framing that within the reality of our organizations and our ecosystems as being something that's absolutely vital to what we need to do.
Delusions of adequacy from a Cork man. We'll wrap up on that one, I think. We'll leave that one there. But look, John, I just wonder if there's any questions for the panel on that theme.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that I think I'll be able to wrap up in a question from the last panel as well. I think it's around the topic of the systems thinking and the multidisciplinary approach and having those skill sets in the future. And the question is really if is there still a place for people with deep expertise in one particular knowledge area, or is that skill set gone, or can people find comfort that that's still going to be a foundation for building up some of these technologies?
I'd say absolutely yes. Some of the research that we did, we looked at that in terms of where do people invest, those organizations that do very, very well out of digital, where do they investment in talent? And there's two areas they invested in. Number one is strategic. Those people who are strategic thinkers and can think about the culture of the organization do extremely well. The other place where it is are people who are domain experts in technology. And they know it absolutely inside out, but specific to the industry they are operating in. And what has shown, the Harvard Review looked at this, and year on year, those companies that invest, number one, in strategy and strategic thinking, and number two, in domain expertise, do much, much better than other organizations. So absolutely, yes.
Great.
And John, do you want to mention the poll?
Yeah, sorry, we'll do a quick poll now as we transition, I suppose, into the third topic. Just get it up here. Okay, so just spend 30 seconds on this around categories of populations that should be prioritized for upskilling, if you had to choose.
I suppose while we're just waiting on that, I think the one thing I've taken away from that previous discussion is around the importance of standard deviation. So that's what my children are going to get next week in homeschooling. To teach myself first. Any answers coming through there?
Yeah, you should be able to see it there now. So it's definitely employees, workers, but then there's a mix across the others. So I think that's maybe a good summary to bring us into the next section around those upskilling opportunities.
Absolutely, John, and it's quite an interesting kind of conversation so far. Maybe I might bring Ula back in here just around. We spoke about the pace of change across different member states, and I'm just really keen to learn about, is there kind of examples of best practice that we should be looking at in Ireland, and how is the rest of Europe doing in comparison maybe to the US or even Asia, China, for example?
I would want to come in on the best practices part, because we have published last year the European Skills Agenda, and part of the European Skills Agenda is a Pact for Skills. And I think the Pact for Skills is something very specific, and it was mentioned in some of the interventions before, the need for partnership as well as linking the triple helix. So what we have done now with the Pact for Skills, and we have launched this last November, we look at the different industrial ecosystems, and we have 14 of these industrial ecosystems. And within one ecosystem, we are encouraging pacts for skills. Because if you look at the needs for in-company upskilling or reskilling, we look at both re and upskilling, and a lot of SMEs cannot afford to have this kind of programs. But several of the larger companies have excellent re and upskilling programs. So we're looking for opportunities that these major companies or the corporates can open up their programs for re and upskilling, and that the SMEs in the value chain can participate and can send their staff there for re and upskilling. But of course, you need then to provide incentives, to open up, but also for the SMEs to send the stuff. And so we have been encouraging to have this kind of partnerships, and for these partnerships under the Pact for Skills, we are holding roundtable events within each of the ecosystems with the 2 commissioners responsible, and we are identifying the skills needs, meaning skills intelligence per ecosystem, because they are not having all the same needs. And once these needs are identified, these are some things where we can build on for the partnerships. And for this, we have a whole also series of blueprints for sectorial cooperation, and we are basing our experience for the Pact on these blueprints. I do not want to go in much more detail, but I encourage you to look at the Pact for Skills, because it could, and I invite you to look, depending on your ecosystem, whether you might want to join some of these partnerships, because that will also mean in the future we are looking in financial incentives which will be provided for this Pact for Skills.
I see everyone scribbling furiously there to see how they can access into that. So thank you for that. I think great nugget of information. But Michael, I think that's really interesting to know just around obviously what's happening across Europe at the moment and how we can access that. You also have a kind of a global view and a global perspective. So I'm just keen to get your understanding around Irish manufacturing vis-a-vis kind of other jurisdictions, other countries, and how we're performing in terms of that kind of lifelong learning agenda, upskilling and reskilling agenda.
Yeah, so look, very, very interesting comments there as well, and I think I can probably add to some of those from Irish context. But in terms of where we see our FDI clients, it's very clearly that they are investing heavily in upskilling and reskilling. In fact, as I just mentioned, our new strategy, we have set out a very clear target in terms of the amount of investments that we intend to support in that arena over the next 4 years, which is in the order of 130, which is almost actually matches the amount of R&D investments that we intend to get over that period. So to make the link between the if you want to call it, the technology moving forward from an R&D perspective and the human capital, they actually now need to become parallel, because you can't have one without the other. I think that comment was made earlier. So we are actually seeing that alignment happening through our engagement with our client companies. I think at a practical level as well, we agree that, you know, there's a lot of commonality across sectors, but there is specifics within it. So for example, where we have our strengths in life sciences, if we take, for example, and we look at NIBRD, very clearly what we've done there in terms of the training and upskilling. Like NIBRT last year, you know, had 4,000 people went through NIBRT in terms of training and upskilling, and these are predominantly industry-based individuals, and they're supported. But we also had a number of students, transition year students, gone through there, just shy of 800. And again, the springboard supports that we have to do that as well, that's all been, you know, vitally important to make sure that we get those skills coming through. But we have a journey to go, because I do think other sectors and subsectors, because even if we look at the sector that Trina is representing, your medical devices, there's multiple subsectors within that with different characteristics that require tweaks within their training needs and their expertise as well. So while there'll be a lot of shared commonality of skills and resources, there will be individual elements within as well. And I think that's what we need to do more of, to sort of help companies to drive that as well. Internationally, I do think that, you know, our feedback from our own companies is as follows. From the academic side, they're actually, you know, very pleased with the way that our academic institutes are responding, and that's the one thing that Ireland is very strong in, and that our universities and our ITs are very good and responsive to industry. Okay, but certainly there are skills gaps being identified, and they're the ones that we to address. I suppose the first thing is we need to identify them, which I think we have done. We need to put programs in place and do those in a coherent manner, which is important as well, because I do think we have to coordinate this from a national perspective to get the maximum output from it. But I think globally we're actually doing quite well. We're on a journey, and I think, as I said before, we just need to make it that is available to everyone, so that SMEs as well as large-scale FDI can benefit from it, because I do think there is a lot of throughput and benefit to come from that collaboration.
And just very briefly on that one, and and maybe this is to Trina or yourself, Michael, just around it, does digital transformation, you mentioned the sub-supply there, and I'm just thinking about the supply chain. Is there potential here for greater convergence, greater connectivity along that supply chain when companies are embarking on this digital transformation journey? I think there's more opportunity there to bring kind of that closer vertical integration along that supply chain.
I would say absolutely, and I think for a number of reasons, and I think the benefits that will come from that as well, from a business perspective, from a regulatory perspective, a quality, efficiency perspective, you can name all of those. But more importantly, what I do think as well is that we're fortunate that we have a very strong FDI base doing a lot of training and upskilling. I actually think we need to start to bring some of that information back into the system so we can deploy it better for our SME and our sub-suppliers as well. So I think there's probably an element there that we need to probably make connections on from the FDI side back into the domestic side as well. But I'll ask Trina answer on our behalf.
Agreed, Michael, absolutely. And we work more and more with well, obviously we're working with iForm and with the technology gateways and within Ireland, and it's just becoming this really great hub, and human capital, as you mentioned as well, Anthony. So it builds a whole ecosystem here anyway. FDI does, and we use so many different Irish industries to supply us. So I think absolutely.
And I suppose it kind of just makes things, the proposition here in Ireland just all that more attractive all the time. Paula, I was really struck by your kind of presentation and some of the opportunities that were available for organisations, particularly around the types of programs that you offer. So can you talk to us around maybe how some organisations can get involved and participate in those programs?
Yes, of course. The assumption is that companies, there is a lot of content that can be taught, a lot of, teachers. We have a lot of university in our, and RTO organization in our membership, but SMEs are quite far away from there. And sometimes they don't even, are not fully aware of their needs. So our idea is to leverage on industrial associations cluster ecosystem so that they can bring together the needs of the SMEs in transformation and that they want to undertake, and kind of mediate towards our content, and they can customize the programs in order to perfectly fits the needs of the SMEs, build on the trust that I have already created in a lot of years of close interaction. So I'm thinking, for example, Antonina, but other people that are in the panel here today, that they know they are closer to the companies and the SMEs, and they might think of participating in these programs together with other regions in Europe. So that would be also some exchange of experience and best practice with other ecosystems. That's the program that I think it's more interesting. And I would like to add that I was a little bit surprised that the focus was only on employees or mainly on employees for upskilling, because I believe that we should target very much, especially for SMEs, the top level management, so that they become aware and can start this travel really, and to make the cultural shift, what all the things that have been mentioned today. And in particular, also the HR, I think should be involved from the very beginning. So my bet and our programs should involve the HR, so that they can really bring a benefit for the organization, because sometimes they don't have even the tools to assess the skill gap and the skills that they need, and they attribute to external factors like the labor market, difficulties that they encounter in having the right skills, but sometimes the issues are mostly internal, because there is a lot of opportunities to upskill around. Okay, sorry.
Absolutely. I think the challenge there is it takes actually a certain set of skills to be able to determine what skills you actually need in the future. And a lot of SME managers will need support in being able to kind of identify that. Konstantinos, I'm very interested around the concept of upskilling versus reskilling, and just around where should we be placing our priority focus. I think sometimes we're all a bit guilty of using those words interchangeably, but actually they're very distinct. So I'm just keen to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, the terms are sometimes used quite loosely. It's always good to go back to definitions, so that people, especially people from different countries, understand the terms in a common way. But putting definitions aside, what I would say is let's think about some basic statistics, which have recently been telling us that a large share of manufacturing jobs, in particular jobs such as metal workers, assemblers, plant operators, face the highest risk of seeing their jobs being automated by digital technologies. You got some figures claiming that more than 50% of jobs in advanced Western economies are likely to see these jobs being automated. But more recent analysis have shown that there's a lot of hype around these figures. If anything, when we're talking about jobs that are likely to be completely decimated, that is more closer to the range of around 9% or so of jobs in our EU labor markets. But at the same time, around 20-30% of jobs are likely to see a substantial transformation. So I take that and I interpret it very easily into saying that the 9% is going to be basically reskilling needs. That refers to people who are going to see substantial structural adjustment. It's going to be people who are going to find themselves being in industries where, for instance, because of decarbonization and the shift to more carbon neutral technologies, or because of this shift towards more digital intensive firms, they're going to find themselves to be in serious need of reskilling. In other words, trying to consider a completely different path, new occupation, new industries that they should explore. The other percentage, the 20 or 30%, refers to people who are employees, but who will nevertheless find that their daily work rhythm their daily tasks are going to be transformed. They're going to have to find a way to change the way with which they interact with new digital equipment, the way with which they communicate with the company. And that refers to upskilling. So this is why I always tend to say that the priority should be on upskilling. Priority should be on widening our investments towards the updating of the skills base of the contemporary workforce. And then, of course, we need to also pay attention to the people who are unemployed, people who are in inactivity, who are going to have to reskill. Reskilling, of course, is a much more difficult business than upskilling, but that does not negate the fact that the European economy is likely to see bigger productivity dividends by managing to engage this much larger share of its working population in upskilling initiatives.
You've set out the business case really strongly there, actually, and why companies should be kind of prioritizing that. Before we kind of wrap up this Q&A, I'm an optimist. So Andrew, I want to go back to you to tell us a little bit about the potential here for Ireland, because I see a big potential, notwithstanding all the challenges that we've kind of discussed. Before we close out, would you be able to kind of maybe share a really good success story with our audience that, you know, just to kind of close us out on a high note?
Good God, you're asking me for the high note. I love it. I love it. Notwithstanding the comment I made earlier on about specifics on analytics, and generally speaking, SMEs are not great at overcoming that obstacle. And there are lots of fantastic examples of brilliant Irish companies. And I'm thinking of Combilift, for example, the work that the Victor's Group are doing up in Monaghan, or Dairy Master down the south, or McHale over in the west, and it's fantastic companies. I think the example I would give you actually is Italian, believe it or not, because I'm sitting here in Ireland for a long time. It's raining out there. I'm thinking of the piazzas in Milan and Paolo's country, and I have one lovely example of a company, and I was really impressed with this group, and I'll explain why. There was 28 people in a small manufacturing company just outside Milan called Road. And every year IMR brings senior executives, large multinational SMEs around the world to see best practice and so on. And we had seen fantastic large multinationals and, lovely motor car companies and so on. And the one that really hit and struck all of us, the small Italian company in Lombardy. Now, Lombardy is an expensive part of the world to be manufacturing product. And this group is making switchgear, like clicks and door locks and that kind of stuff for white goods, like fridges and dishwashers and that kind of thing. And they were exporting millions of euros worth of this product to China, which I found extraordinary. And, if you're looking for positivity, that's the positivity. And when you got into it, when you met the owner manager of this company, fantastic guy, English was a second or third language. He was explaining to all these multinationals, these Irish paddies that were around the machines. Like, there was more people arrived to visit his company than were working in his company. So we just took over there was fellas looking under machines and trying to figure out how stuff was working and so on. But how he had done it is he put very simple little sensors and switchgear and so on onto the machines themselves. So he was slicing material, putting it through shredders, molding, assembly, boxing, packaging. It was very straightforward stuff. You could see in the rooms themselves what the areas were, but all of it was digitized, or the information was digitized, and it came to a mobile phone. And it was funny because he just said, I'm only interested in two things. Now, he assumed quality, right? He assumed quality. So on time in full, and am I making money? Those are the two things he cared about. Now, when you really think about it, do we need a whole pile more, really? Good quality, on time in full, am I making money? And what he was doing was the sensors on the machines could pick up the flow of material, for example, whether the machine was opening and closing, whether it was working and so on. So he had OEE figures, for example, that were pumping back to him. Now, if there was a small problem, the employee's phone rang. There was a very simple interface that his guys had devised that told him there's a problem with this machine. If it got a little bit more serious, it went to the supervisor in a different format. It showed the supervisor how that was going to impact the throughput for that day. If it went to the guy who owned the building, it showed the bottom line, where his dollars were being impacted. So all of a sudden you had a system, very simple, very flat organization that was coming through and giving him very pertinent information at the point of need. In other words, The noise in the system was converted to information at the point of the decision maker in a language that he or she understood. I loved it. And Claire, to answer your question, there's no downside on this, none whatsoever. There is no downside on this. We are going to take this journey. Michael Owen is right. We're on a journey. We are going to take this journey. We are going to make this work. We will bring in these digitization inputs and impacts onto floors in manufacturing facilities all over Ireland. It will not steal jobs. This is utter nonsense. The types of jobs that we look like will be transformed. It will replace tasks. And you know, I often say to people, do you want to pack a chicken or do you want to program the robot that packs the chicken? We have a better quality of life. We'll have better information. People and SMEs that are supplying people like Trina, for example, will be linked by a digital thread through their supply chain, far more connectivity with the customer, far more focused in terms of unit of one, huge impact in terms of productivity and so on. So there is no upside. There's a fantastic opportunity for Ireland in this, absolutely second to none. And you know, you look at the quality of people that we've got around this table, including yourself, Claire, and the group that you represent in IBEC. Let's be really clear how important that organization is in the ecosystem. To be able to pull a guy like Anthony McCauley and give out to him and harass him and harangue him and tell him he's a moron, this is fantastically important stuff to be able to do, because these gods need to be brought down to the real world and explain what they're not doing correctly. But I can tell you that Ireland has a fantastic opportunity in a future. And it's because of the people that like this that are around this forum. And thanks for the opportunity.
Look, I can't sum up this better. And I think what we'll do now is hand it over to Dennis, because I think there is a huge opportunity for us all. It's just about keeping on that journey, working together, keep collaborating, sharing experiences and intelligence. So Dennis, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire, and Andrew. Thank you very much for ending on such a positive note in terms of Ireland's position. Maybe just very briefly, some takeaways I've taken from just listening to the discussion there. I think firstly, the importance in terms of positioning of Ireland in terms of digitalization, strong robotics, but obviously weaker in these digital skills and their importance. I think Trina's comment in terms of multinational companies in particular on the importance of overall system thinking within manufacturing and that breakdown in terms of computer skills linked into the manufacturing. But then to look at SMEs and the importance there of helping them to identify the digital skills that will assist them in terms of their growth. Over and above that, I think some of the comments that Konstantinos made about what are the issues or how to make this stronger, and the bringing together of companies regionally in terms of linking them is of enormous benefit. Obviously, the links between industry and academia, the importance of company culture and also strategy was brought out. Finally, I'd just like to thank the panel for Anthony, Paolo, Trina, Konstantinos, Ulla, Michael, and Andrew. You really have brought an issue alive and shows that we're very much in a transition in terms of what's going on. And to yourself, Claire, for being an excellent moderator, and also to my colleagues, John, and particularly Sophie O'Connor, who actually arranged today's meeting. Look, thank you all, and thank you for what has been a really interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.